Welcome everybody to Left Reckoning. My name is David Griscom, and I am joined as always by my good friend and comrade Matt Lech. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, David. Good to be with you.
A lot of stories, folks. I mean, there's too much to keep up with. If you haven't caught our conversation on the Jackman program, we went deep into the Iran protests, as well as some radical socialist history. But today, we're going to talk a bit about Texas. We have been covering this James Talarico, Jasmine Crockett Senate race on this program, since before Crockett even jumped in the race. In fact, we were one of the early programs that said that it looks like Crockett is going to jump in. We have been very critical of Jasmine Crockett because of her positions that she has taken on Israel. And we have been waiting to get a little bit more clarity from James Talarico on his positions. And we finally got it. So we are going to be talking about James Talarico, Israel and Palestine, with two very, very special guests. And I mean, anything else to jump into before we get into it, folks? All right, let's get into it. Welcome back, Left Reckoners. David here, joined as always by my good friend and comrade Matt Lech. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, David. Good to be with you.
Happy to have you here. I mean, Matt, we've been talking a lot about the Senate race here in Texas, a lot about Crockett, a lot about Talarico. And if people remember, one of the things I've been asking for from Talarico is for him to be a little bit more explicit about his positions. You get what you ask for here. And to talk about James Talarico's positions on Israel and Palestine, we have Alex Birnel and Judith Norman. Alex Birnel is a community activist, and Judith Norman is a philosophy professor and also organizes with Jewish Voice for Peace. Thank you all both so much for coming on Left Reckoning.
We appreciate being here.
Really glad to be here.
Well, I mean, let's dive into it a little bit. I mean, I think we'll be able to look a little bit closely at the text, what he said explicitly, but maybe to kind of set us up, I'll ask you first, Alex. Talarico has been running for Senate. There's been a lot of questions about where he kind of falls on these major questions. He does signal in a generally progressive way, but a lot of times, that leaves a lot of space for him to, I don't know. I don't think it's duplicitous necessarily, but I also think that there's a political advantage when you don't have to take solid policy positions. So I'm just curious, Alex, when you saw the statement on Israel-Palestine that he put out, what was your initial reaction here?
As a result of having read statements of this kind before from several electeds, ones that I respect and appreciate, I've built up some expectations for what I might find in them. The first is, I begin from an expectation of disappointment. And I think that's because, I'm not, as of yet, expecting to see, somebody who is avowedly anti-imperialist, understands the full history of the colonization of Palestine and the number of coups that the U.S. government has been responsible for over the course of the 20th century and before, sort of like vying for power at the very top of the U.S. government. It doesn't seem like our politics have really gotten there. There have been candidates who have pushed, I think, U.S. foreign policy as one of their main policy planks, but I think in general, people on the kind of progressive left, maybe the Sanders left, like to say that issues of foreign policy are actually low on voters' minds. And so their goal is mainly to talk about affordability, healthcare, these kind of bread and butter issues, which of course, as somebody who shares those positions, I think is valuable to hear about. But foreign policy tends to, either go unaddressed or we fail to articulate a vision that's really an independent one from sort of the status quo. And I think especially in Palestine, that's the case.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Judith, I think we'll have an opportunity to really kind of dive in here, but I'm just curious if you had anything you wanted to add to what Alex kind of noted there about the reactions to this statement.
Yeah, the statement clearly is an attempt to position himself with respect to certain voters and to contain maybe the certain statements he made in December about cutting off offensive aid to Israel and never taking money from AIPAC, which played well with the crowd, but didn't play so well with Jewish Insider, who threatened him with the loss of votes from what they call the Jewish community. And I think this is just an attempt to, shore up any damage by assuring people that he is going to be decidedly centrist. I mean, the statement had so many signals that he is not going to challenge the essential framing on Israel-Palestine as the mainstream Democratic position comes down to him, and don't worry about anything radical coming from him. So it's disappointing, particularly in light of what looked like, a gesture towards some more serious rhetoric around cutting off aid to Israel and sympathy for the victims of genocide in Gaza. But yeah, this is a don't worry, folks, it's business as usual reassurance.
I mean, that is kind of was my first reaction to seeing this statement, and it reminded me of some other things that we've seen. I mean, I remember when Greg Casar, for example, was running for Congress, having kind of similar experiences here. But I wanted to ask y'all before we get into it, because I'm going to tell y'all, and I'm a Texan as well, and I think that this position is very valid. But I know what we're going to be seeing in the comments is, why are y'all complaining? This is somebody who's way better than anyone else who'll be the Republican senator from Texas. I'm just curious if you'll have a response to that kind of accusation or complaint that we are certainly to get for criticizing James Talarico here.
Yeah, I would just quickly say, we're all adults. These things deserve to be weighed. I think fairly, as equally as they can. Voters get to reach their own judgments in the ballot box. But this is a matter of public discourse, especially after 2 years of genocide for which, our government is complicit and responsible. Somebody that's seeking a seat in the U.S. Senate should be asked about these issues. And the way that these issues play in, kind of larger partisan dynamics and people's electoral success, I think can be discussed. But I think to honor the dignity of Palestinian life, to understand that Palestinians are always asked to sort of put themselves to the side, and that the effect of putting themselves to the side is that they've been oppressed for 77 years, largely with the continued complicity of this government. I think it's entirely fair to raise this issue on its own merits and to expect everybody in the room to understand why that's being done. It's being done for reasons of truth, reasons of dignity, and that's sort of separate and apart from electoral calculus.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think that's a perfectly said, frankly. And I think that, people, one, we're all adults, and also people should grow up a little bit. It's perfectly fair and reasonable to criticize and question politicians. But let's get into this a little bit, and of course, we'll link below. I know there's been a lot of really good kind of dissections of this statement that we'll link folks to. But let's look at a couple. I'll read out a little bit from it, and then get some kind of reactions here. Again, this is a note from James Talarico. In it, this is his Israel section. He says, October 7th was the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. The horrors will reverberate through our hearts and minds for generations to come. Hamas is a terrorist organization that must be disarmed and dismantled. Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish and democratic state and defend itself. Tragically, since October 7th, Benjamin Netanyahu has made Israel less safe, bombing civilians, restricting aid, and isolating Israel globally do not bring security. Furthermore, his actions have prolonged hostage captivity, undermined Israel's moral standing, and made Jewish people around the world less safe. Well, just there, I mean, let's get the reaction to that. There's a lot of things in there that I have a feeling will be controversial.
Yeah, I think, real quickly, I'd just like to start by saying that I think the tendency of these statements is always to say out of the gate very clearly that Hamas is a terrorist organization. And I think we'd be remiss not to say that terrorist is a politicized word. It's usually applied to non-state actors, and we can talk about the nature of the crimes that Hamas committed on October 7th. But I think without the context of, Israel's history of land grabs, settler colonialism, occupation, ethnic cleansing, all of which are also terroristic activities just committed by a state. And that's what really gives this term its politicized nature. It tends to be applied to non-state actors. And I think on every measure that you would accuse Hamas of being guilty of terroristic activity, you could do the same to the state of Israel. And it's not like Talarico's statement is applying equal standards here. And so I think the first thing to note is just sort of the double standards and racism implicit. He's missing a sense of the power dynamics between a state that has nuclear weapons, the backing of a global empire, and basically all the cards, versus a stateless people who every other means of national liberation, every other means of struggle, has been closed. And I think that creates a situation in which events like October 7th, unfortunately, are overdetermined ones. And unfortunately, too, it sets up a situation where nothing justifies October 7th, but October 7th justifies everything. And we've seen, I think, Israel in the last 2 years commit a genocide basically because of the events of October 7th. And without clarifying that Israel has that history too, I think, James Talarico bites a bit too much into that asymmetry.
Yeah. Can I
Yes, please.
follow up on that? Yeah. I absolutely agree with all of that. And I want to sort of mention that the asymmetry that, he's that's at issue is sort of like intensified by the very first sentence. October 7th was the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. I mean, right there, the framing is really mendacious, right? I mean, the idea that this is part of a history of anti-Jewish violence that's continuous with the Holocaust, which is which is a lie, that there's some sort of, there's some sort of straight through line between the two of them. To mention the Holocaust at the beginning, to get people's sorts of, sense of the unsafety of the Jews that's associated with this Holocaust, and to center that is really problematic, particularly since, it might be literally true that October 7th was the deadliest day for the Jews since the Holocaust, but the Jews weren't killed on October 7th because they're Jews, right? I mean, the Jewishness is accidental. They're killed because they are part of a settler colonialist project. And that is the reason for the violence. That's the reason for the Palestinian grievance. And that's the reason for, the mass slaughter. And so to sort of like, efface that, bury all of that with the sense that it's continuous with the Holocaust is just a historical narrative which sets everything else up for, just a disastrous analysis to come.
Yeah. I mean,
and then, I was just going to offer on the kind of two other major points in that opening statement. Number one, the democratic and Jewish state, there is ambiguity in that part of the statement that I think Texas voters deserve clarity on. The first part of that ambiguity is he saying that it only has the right to exist as a democratic state, which it already is? And if so, he's normalizing apartheid in 48 Israel, calling that democracy? Or is he saying, that Israel only has the right to exist in a democratic condition, which is something we could potentially agree upon? And I think, it's just not clearly articulated which camp he falls into. And we, as Texans, a state that is very familiar with assaults on democracy, deserve somebody who can diagnose what is and isn't a democracy. And I think, he's demonstrated capacity to name those things in Texas. And I think he just needs to learn to apply them to foreign policy as well. And then the other aspect of the statement, that it has the right to exist as a Jewish state. I think the entanglement of Judaism and nationalism, a full fusion of church and state, he knows how to condemn that when it's Christian nationalism at the Texas legislature, but fails to do it in this case, doesn't seem to recognize how those ideas mixing has led to all kinds of violence, harm, and anti-democratic outcomes. So I think there's a variety of issues with that part of the statement. Finally, you can't reduce the state to Netanyahu. It's a settler state. It's dispossessed Palestinians. long before Netanyahu, and it's kind of integral to the nature of the society. So to reduce it to Netanyahu is sort of what liberals like to do with Trump here, to say that if we got rid of Trump, that, America would suddenly be a just place. Palestine wouldn't be just because Netanyahu's gone. So it has that flawed logic as well.
Well, I think that's totally true. And I mean, I think most of our audience has been watching that kind of move, where all the sins are kind of put on Netanyahu instead of, Zionism and the Israeli state. But I want to linger on this really quick. I want to linger on this point about a Jewish state, because I mean, this is a very, very, wild claim, and Talarico, I don't think can get away with it as easy as even other folks, because he has made such a big part of his political career and his political persona about opposing Christian nationalism in this country. And yet for some reason, in Israel, he supports, a Jewish nationalism. And I don't know if you have this handy, Matt, but we have this clip from him just the other day on the Ezra Klein program in the New York Times, talking about his issues with Christian nationalism.
Powerful people will always see religion as a tool to make more money and be able to keep people in line.
For those unfamiliar with the term, what is Christian nationalism?
You can define it a lot of different ways. I define it as the worship of power in the name of Christ. I define it that way because I want us to see it as part of a very long tradition.
How do they define it? They being the people who would self-identify with it.
I would think they would define it as wanting a Christian nation. But again, these politicians want a Christian nation unless it means providing healthcare to the sick.
He goes on, and I think that's good, right? He goes on to kind of note how the thing that they want, they don't even actually want it because they're out of line with Christianity. I'm not here to get into a theological debate about Judaism or Christianity or something like that, but it's very clear that he opposes, despite being a Christian national state in this country, in this state, but again, makes a special exception in Israel. And I'm just curious, if y'all could kind of dig in on that a little bit more, right? This is a very common thing that is almost, I think most people don't even hear it, actually, when folks say that Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state. But that's a very specific thing, that they're advocating for.
Yeah, I mean, and to continue with the way that Alex was analyzing this before, to sort of combine a Jewish and a democratic state, is a nonsense, right? And I don't think that he's being he's failing to make the right distinctions. I think he's being studiedly ambiguous. He wants to be able to use this phrase, like you said, that we don't even notice anymore, and get away with it, right? This is the way that he's signaling to voters that certain, challenges to conventional foreign policy are off the table. He isn't going to talk about Israel as a settler colonial project or an apartheid state. When he's saying that it has the right to exist as it is, he's saying that he's going to accept the thing that it is, a settler colonial project and apartheid state. But what he'll do is examine various ways in which, maybe it goes too far, right? In sort of committing a genocide. But the truth is you can't distinguish between what Israel is and what it's doing. It's a Jewish supremacist settler colony, and it'll be pursuing expansionist and ethnic cleansing policies. It's doing what it's doing because of what it is. Mm-hmm. And so for him to take off the table, for discussion, for criticism, what it is, he's signaling that he's going to accept a lot of what it's doing. Belligerent expansionism, ethnic cleansing, discrimination against, Palestinian and other sort of non-Jewish populations within the state. All that is okay. He just wants it to do it a little bit more quietly, right? So it doesn't, make the headlines and upset our sleep. Yeah. So, that's part of why I see this statement as just extraordinarily, reassuring to sort of the Zionist status quo. I don't think he's, being, ignorant or anything like that. I think it's just full of signals that certain challenges to our traditional policy with respect to Israel he is not going to be taking those on. Mm-hmm. And that means, he's going to be supporting expansionist, belligerent, sort of settler colony, Jewish supremacist state in the Middle East. You know? And, we can say, but isn't that a, contradiction? Isn't that hypocrisy? And he'll be trying to dodge the question. Which is disappointing in a sort of candidate who's sort of like making a whole point of his moral. If he's sort of like, I'm a politician, this is what I need to say, then, we might not like it, but he's a politician, he needs to say, but I'm a man of God. I, listen to the cries of your little children. And it's you can't have it both ways.
We said that before we started recording, that he's too sharp on this stuff to then play dumb in certain contexts. And that's the new tightrope he finds himself in. And there's just one thing I know we've spent a lot of time on the opening sentences there, but we're a few paragraphs later, he's going to talk about this fragile ceasefire. And there's a way politicians started talking about ceasefire that made it clear that they were not after a permanent ceasefire. AKA, they thought violence at some point was the answer. And you can see that in Talarico's statement here when the third line in this paragraph, Hamas is a terrorist organization that must be disarmed and dismantled. Well, implicitly there, I'm reading a license for violence by Israel.
And I hope we're okay on time. I think we might go a little bit longer if that's okay with everybody. I wanted to note something very specific here, right? And maybe it's a little bit of an abstract point, but Talarico, has come out and, he has said things, explicitly about Gaza that, can feel very powerful, right? He's kind of reframed the famous line of like, thinking about the, I yelled at God for, starving children. I realized starving children were God screaming at me. And then he said that God is screaming at all of us in Gaza as we speak, right? That's very powerful rhetoric. But this is the thing that kind of frustrates me about this particular statement, and is part of the doubts that I've had about Talarico from the get-go, is that yes, like apart from like the most sadistic and disgusting and morally depraved individuals, people don't want to see starving children or the genocide or this kind of killing. What it is it's something that people are willing to accept in order to either protect their political career, to protect American influence and power, if you're in Israel, to protect the Jewish state, the Israeli state, right? The idea, like most people, again, except for people who have very severe moral failings, are horrified at what's going on. The question is like, do you have the backbone to stand up against these kind of things? And when you're saying things like God is yelling at us in Gaza, but you're unwilling to even rhetorically in this moment, in this statement, right? To make a strong analysis of what's going on. I mean, it really makes it difficult for me to trust you on a lot of things, frankly.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly that there's kind of profound incongruencies between, as Matt was saying, his intelligence, his ability to inspire people with speech, his ability to recall scripture and integrate scripture. Speaking to, many people of faith who wanted access from their faith, ways of relating to, the crimes the crimes against humanity being committed in Gaza at this moment, that all of that skill and ability, just does not square with the things being committed to in this statement, because this statement is very status quo reinforcing. And so I think it requires an aptitude on the part of voters to compare sort of, how a politician is currying favor and curating a public image versus, the particulars of the stance that they're taking. And that's just voter literacy, right? It's like knowing the difference.
Well, I think there's two things that I think we should kind of focus on here before maybe talking more broadly about Talarico. One is what he says about offensive and kind of like defensive weapons. And I'm just curious, I think most of our audience has some experience going through this, but if y'all could just kind of like catch folks up, what is this kind of distinction? Why is it that folks like Talarico are talking like this? Why are a lot of politicians using this kind of language? And why is it something that, folks doing the kind of work that y'all have been doing, take issue with?
Yeah. Man, there's so much to be said about this. Number one, I think a lot of this statement, as Judith has rightly noted throughout the conversation, is about signaling certain things. And I think one thing that people want to signal with statements like this is a demonstration of nuance And so you get these distinctions around offensive and defensive weapons, as if that distinction was all that meaningful to the folks that are on the other side of the barrel of the gun, right? The distinction's not all that meaningful to a Palestinian. What kind of weapons and how we relate to it in terms of statecraft and national security. Maybe from the side of U.S. foreign policy, we relate to weapons with these distinctions, but certainly no Palestinian does. A weapon is a weapon. That's the first thing that needs to be said. And the second thing is I do think that, people have maybe agreed to the position that there's a consensus around the, infrastructure like the Iron Dome serving a defensive purpose. But I actually think that there's an analysis that can be given of the Iron Dome because it's a unique, and capable and effective missile interception system, that it enables what people have taken to calling a cost-free occupation. That ordinarily, when you're occupying a people and you're, systematically depriving them of the means of life, you would expect some form of response. You would expect some form of retaliation. And this is not, my extremism, my radicalism, right? This is things that scholars of armed conflict, terrorism will tell you, guys like Robert Pape. And so the existence of the Iron Dome, enabling a relatively cost-free occupation actually enables quite a bit of offense on the part of Israel to continually pummel Gaza as they have over the last 17 years that Gaza has been under siege. And so in this way, the defensive weapon actually operates offensively on the part of the occupier. And that's a kind of key thing to make clear.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that, this is something that I think we have seen from a lot of, let's call them like left progressive politicians have kind of come to this kind of language. And I think this signals kind of where you might find Talarico if he were elected, voting. I want to get into this other bit here, which is about the two-state solution. And I'll just read out his conditions here, because I think that this is probably one of the clearest statements about where he stands. I support a two-state solution under the following basic conditions. Hamas and other terrorist groups must be removed from power. Sovereignty must be respected for both nations. Israel must halt illegal settlements and recognize the Palestinian state. Palestinian leaders must recognize Israel and reject violence. What is the kind of first reaction to this two-state solution, as he calls it, that he lays out?
For me, the first thing to state clearly is that, for U.S. politicians to sort of state definitively, I'm pro two states, or I'm a proponent of one state. From the very get-go, it's prescriptive. It's as if the U.S. is in a position to dictate just terms in the resolution of the Palestine question, which we are not, right? We have systematically diminished any credibility that we have as a broker in determining the outcome of that question, because we've helped to create a situation in which, only one version of the one-state solution is currently on the table to come to fruition, and that is one of a greater Israel, right? We've locked in place a condition of counterinsurgency on the ground that basically ensures, the PA exists as a junior partner to the occupation, repressing grassroots movements in the West Bank. We've through continual funding of systems like the Iron Dome, ensured that Gaza remains in place as the way that it is. And so one has to ask themselves the question, given this setup, this puts us on a trajectory where political ideas like that of a greater Israel are the only ones on the table to be realized. And so we don't have the credibility to claim that we know best. That's the first issue. The second issue is to say, very clearly that when it comes to one state and two states, that, we only have the responsibility as those that organize for Palestine to create the conditions for freedom, self-determination, and non-domination. The resolution of the Palestine question, what political form it takes, what post-colonial form it takes, whether that be one state, some other formation, is for Palestinians to determine. And then, the third thing to say is that, there is a group of people who are prominent scholars on this issue, organizations on the ground that have begun to say over years that the two-state solution from a material and practical standpoint is a functionally dead object. It's a functionally dead goal as a result of settlement expansion post-Oslo. And so in this way, because it has sort of a material and practical impossibility to it, when U.S. politicians say that they're pro-two states, it allows them to posture as pro-Palestine to folks that are new to the issue, that are bringing earnesty to the issue, that care deeply about the issue. They hear somebody say, I'm pro-two states. It sounds to them like this person's a supporter of, Palestinian liberation, Palestinian justice. But the politicians saying it in this case, if they know the subject well enough, I think they're also aware that it allows them that access to kind of strike the pose while actually never having the risk of that position coming to fruition. And then, were two states to be realized, it also deserves to be said that doesn't automatically mean justice, right? Mm-hmm. Israel has nuclear weapons. Palestine would be a very fragile and new state. This doesn't automatically mean, with two peoples, with two states, that we automatically have just outcomes, right? We don't necessarily want supremacist states still intact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really appreciate the way you're framing that, Alex, that, despite sort of like apparently throwing some crumbs to Palestinian freedom, the whole way in which he centers the agency of the U.S. in determining the final status of the region sort of reproduces what's been problematic all along, right? The way in which he centers, we can talk about this, the question of Jewish safety throughout this statement, reproduces, what's the cause of the problem, right? Despite sort of like littering it with little crumbs of, maybe we'll cut offensive weapons to Israel. But even apart from that, some of the rhetoric, just anybody with sort of eyes to see some of the rhetoric, Hamas and other terrorist groups must be removed from power. And Alex already pointed to, who gets to say what terrorism is? Sort of the violence against civilians for a political end. Israel is massively overrepresented in terms of terrorist violence, and yet Hamas is the one that's named. Israel must halt illegal settlements, as if any of the settlements are legal, right? The sort of phrase illegal settlements also sort of reinforces the legitimacy of the Israeli expansionist project. Palestinian leaders must recognize Israel and reject violence. This sort of like unidirectional, there's no sort of mirroring. Israeli leaders must reject violence as well. So the whole statement is, riddled with imbalances, which, as y'all have pointed out, some of these statements have been repeated to the point where they've been naturalized, and we fail to see the imbalances that are reproduced here. But I do think that we are in a moment where a long-term political sort of like tolerance of the relationship between U.S. and Israel, the belligerent relationship between U.S. and Israeli expansionism, is sort of like, in terms of the voterships, no longer something you can take for granted, right? Mm-hmm. And there's and what I see here is him very much failing to step into a leadership role, a role of moral leadership, where he can help define what becomes politically acceptable, and that's hugely disappointing.
Yeah, I'll just note that, bringing it into the Texas context, and I know there's been some good writing about this as well. We're also living in a state right now where this question of whether or not Israel can continue its genocide of Palestinian people without end it affects us, one, like morally and all that, but also this is one of the number one tools that the government has been using in this state to silence and attack groups. And, the way that like people who work or associated with the state government effectively having to sign like a loyalty pledge to Israel is fundamentally anti-democratic, fundamentally anti-American, and also adding to the fact that in Texas, what we are seeing has been a really horrifying ramping up of certainly anti-Palestinian sentiment. I mean, we saw right here in Austin, a Palestinian American was stabbed by somebody. You're also just seeing an incredibly horrifying increase in like anti-Muslim sentiment. Again, not just from random people on the street, but from our elected officials. For Talarico not to be able to kind of speak more clearly on that as well, I find to be very, very frustrating, even just like on a kind of self-centered version of like, how does this directly affect me as a Texan? I would hope that somebody who's running a more progressive campaign for Senate would, consider this in his statement. But Judith and Alex, I really appreciate y'all so much taking the time to join us and speak about this. Your perspective really does mean a lot and makes things very clear for us also. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Well, it was really great having Alex and Judith on the program. I want to note a couple things, Matt, and I'm sorry to be sensitive about this, but I already know that we will be getting in the chat and in the comments a lot of complaints about something that we talked about during the program, which is like, why are you talking about Israel and Palestine in a Texas Senate race? One, I want to note a few things there. I think that the point that was made by Alex and the conversation with Judith like really illuminated why this matters so much. I totally agree with like, folks should be adults, but also there's a very pessimistic aspect of this too, about Texans that I just can't abide. This is my home. This is where I came about. This is how I understand myself, how I learned about the world, was seeing the solidarity and the kindness of everyday Texans. I've marched in the street in places like DC and in New York. And I'll tell you, one of the most powerful and meaningful marches I've ever been to for Palestinian human rights was right here in Austin, Texas. Right. So the idea that this is abstract, or not something that affects everyday Texans is just totally ludicrous. It's one of the things that people say when they don't have any real connection or understanding of this state or this place. So yes, it does matter to people here. Two, I want to get, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Well, and as a non-Texan, for folks who are, really in on Talarico, you're probably somebody who wants to see a Democratic Party reflect more accurately the wills and desires and material needs of its base. And the Israel lobby in this country is a massive impediment to that. Cori Bush was probably was definitely the most working class person in Congress. And she got iced out by record spending, and now there's an empty suit named Wesley Bell in her seat.
A monster, frankly.
Exactly. just sick. And the same thing happened with George Latimer and Jamal Bowman. So even if you decide, like, you know what, I don't care about genocide, I'm all about this electoral outcome, you still can't escape this.
It's also something, as somebody who like believes in democracy, like as a democratic socialist, this is something that is very critical too, even outside of power. And I mean that in the sense of like our movements are in power. And frankly, also like James Talarico, does not like represent even, like the entirety of like the progressive movement in Texas, and certainly not even like the democratic socialist movement in Texas, which has been growing and continues to win. I mean, I live in a city where we have a democratic socialist on our city council, where a DSA member, Greg Casar, a one-time DSA member, Greg Casar, went off to Congress. San Antonio has multiple city council members who are democratic socialists, right? The idea that it's not here is totally ludicrous. But like we are out of power in the general sense. And as somebody who believes in democracy, this is something that I think is really, really critical, where you are always cultivating and participating fully in that process. And what I mean by that is like being able to criticize folks who want to hold positions of power, right? Being able to engage tactically and strategically in politics certainly is a skill and something that we need to be able to do. Me rightfully criticizing James Talarico for these statements is participating in democracy in that full sense, because if you start saying to yourself, well, I'm going to be quiet about something that I believe, or something, this isn't sitting right with me, I don't, I have doubts about this person now because of this, and I'm going to be quiet, especially if you were in the media, for God's sakes, but even in general conversation, right? You are saying that like, hey, in order to save democracy, we have to kind of suppress those democratic aspects of ourselves, right? That's a dangerous kind of tendency to get into. Now, again, I'm all about being strategic and engaging in politics in a real way. The fact that Talarico doesn't have like the full same positions as I do on Palestine isn't even the thing that is like so bothering about this. It's that what we saw from this set of statements from him was like a real lack of leadership and, frankly, a significant amount of cowardice. The Israel lobby in this country and in this state has been exposed for what it is: an anti-democracy organization hell-bent on creating death and destruction abroad, and would be very happy if we saw, if people in this country lost their ability to have things like free speech. Hell, I live in a state that is legislated on those kind of things, right? So again, these aren't abstract questions to all of us. And not being able to be full-throated and to stand up against these kind of things in even like 50% way that you might want to see from a politician, I think is very, very revealing. As Israel and the Israeli, like the Zionist lobby in this country, right, that wants to see Israel be able to act with impunity, wants to limit democracy in our own country, has been exposed as something to most average Americans to not be willing to kind of take them on right now. I don't know. It shows a lack of leadership. It shows a cowardice that I think is very, very telling. And yeah, I'm going to call that out, because I think that this isn't even something like it would have been maybe 10, 15 years ago, right, Matt? Where like there was a moment, it was like, oh, we can't kind of talk about that. We have had a crash course for most people in this country who might have been fairly ignorant on this issue for a long time about what these organizations represent, what Israel has been doing to Palestinians, where, yeah, those same excuses that we got from progressives in the past, they just don't hold water. Certainly on the moral sense, but also just like on the practical way, right? Like they just don't get to say that like, oh, if I criticize this or this happens, then I'll never get elected. That's just not true anymore. But please go ahead, Matt.
I mean, and also we have an example of someone who has, I would say, a similar innate talent toward political messaging in Zohar Mamdani. Talk about these things in the type of ways that Talarico should if he was being consistent about this stuff, saying Israel has a right to exist as a state with equal rights when asked about the right to exist question. These are things that Talarico sees too, and he's deciding not to deploy him. And that's disappointing. And like Judith said, that is him walking away from a position of leadership that he could have right now. Maybe it's enough to win this primary. But in terms of like what we actually need going forward, or what it could do, like take a shot, right? Like Zoran did that in the context of a long shot where people didn't think he was going to win the New York City mayoralty. And what ended up happening is the authenticity of him bowled over everyone. He didn't even need the like progressives and the vote sharing stuff for ranked choice voting. He won. And that's because he was bold. And so I think that's the lesson that Talarico, I mean, that's the sad thing about this letter is it's him taking an off ramp of leadership.
And look, I mean, I will just say again, like we're going to continue, covering this race. On this program, we don't really endorse candidates. We didn't really have any intention of endorsing one way or the other. For example, in the Senate race, I certainly can understand why people support Talarico over Crockett. I mean, what we've seen from Crockett on not just this issue, but many, many issues has been extremely worrying. I mean, I haven't been particularly impressed with her. But Talarico has been this kind of open question mark about if he's going to be able to connect the rhetoric that he has been kind of putting forward with like concrete stances on these kind of things. And I mean, on this issue, credit him for maybe coming out a little bit and being concrete. But it leaves a lot to be desired. You can, when you go and you decide what you want to do, you can kind of weigh these things against each other. But I will tell you right now, this is a promise for me, is that I'm always just going to say to y'all exactly what I say to my friends and those people close to me about what I think about an issue like this. And anyone who has an expectation that us, particularly Matt and I, and this program, independent media, kind of holds fire or doesn't talk honestly about these kind of things, you don't really understand the purpose of these things, which is to kind of like push and change our politics rather than just accepting the status quo. So again, I'm sure there's going to be many people who watch this who are going to be disappointed and will continue to support Talarico. I think there's a bunch of people who are going to support Talarico no matter what. They're going to be very mad at us for even bringing up these criticisms. And then there'll be folks who would never support a Talarico or a Democrat in any kind of case. Those are your decisions. What we do here is we talk about these issues and we try to talk about them fairly and honestly. And that's just, that's just the kind of quick analysis about why we cover things in the way we do and what's up. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Matt? Or yeah, all right. And there's some more Crockett stuff that we could have gotten into. This vote last week, but we've talked enough about her. I think on this program that it's only fair that we bring that same kind of fire to Talarico. So that will be it for this week on the Texas Senate race, but that won't be it for Left Reckoning, because I have not been informed what we're doing next, but Matt has told me that my memory is going to be tickled. So let's get into it.
David, some new ideas enter the scene. Let me give you a little glimpse at some of these ideas here.
Oh, shit.
How about we start looking at results over process and ideology?
Interesting.
Let's deliver some outcomes. We love the outcomes.
I've been saying I want more outcomes.
More than political rhetoric, right? How about that excessive regulation is getting in the way of housing and we need to cut red tape?
That's interesting. That's a new idea. I haven't heard that before.
We have these rigid right-left ideologies. And what about California as a cautionary tale?
Oh,
Do we have an idea of who we're talking about here? Who are we talking about?
I don't know, but I'm thinking that I might have to go into recovery mode after this.
No, actually, it's not that. What about this? Reject anti-wealth rhetoric. Democrats should champion business success and not be afraid of economic aspiration.
Oh, is this about keeping it simple?
It is about keeping it simple. Or as I like to say, the original abundance bro who just abundanced too soon, Stephen Klubeck. Now,
let's go.
Stephen Klubeck. Yes. I had been thinking about the no bumps in a road thing and realizing, why didn't Ezra and Derek Thompson interview former timeshare mogul from Las Vegas, Stephen Klubeck? Because he's been saying this shit, guys. Here is Stephen Klubeck back in 2016 during the primary on MSNBC. For folks who don't know, this was historic stuff, and it's a shame it's been lost to history because this is a path we could have taken, and instead we just mocked this guy. So here's with Stephanie Ruhle.
President Trump hooking himself up. But are Democrats going after it in the right way? Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who think President Trump is morally reprehensible, but they think, I want my taxes cut, I'm going to vote with him. And when Democrats continue to say, down with the billionaires, we can't stand the rich, a lot of people want to be rich. So is it the right message that the Democrats are going with?
It's so effing wrong.
Whoa.
I've talked to Schumer. I've talked to Wyden. I've talked to Pelosi.
And said what?
And I said, if you use the term billion again, I'm done.
Why?
Because it's aspirational.
For the clip cut there, if you use the term billionaire again, I'm going to cut funding, is what he said.
Yeah.
I said, if you use the term billion again, I'm done.
Why?
Because it's aspirational. I didn't start with anything. Just penalize everyone that's done well. We all want to do well. And we should be the party of doing well. We should be a party of business and leadership. And it is very, very disturbing when I hear the millionaire or billionaire word. And I've told them to stop it, knock it off. Because everyone wants to do really well. And this is the world of aspirations.
Then are you worried that the Democratic Party is going too far to the left?
So much so, it drives me nuts. So much so, it would make me quit the party.
Ooh.
And I've made it very clear, I'll cut your money off. And others will do the same. We've had enough.
Okay,
We
so
need a new brand.
And what is that brand? Because right now there is an opportunity. If Democrats lose, for example, in the state of Virginia, if that isn't a wake-up call that the Democratic leadership needs to get together and say, we've got to find a middle ground. Because if the Democrats continue to go far to the left, you've got that whole group in the center that aren't going to go the way of Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. And then you're going to fracture the party even more.
It's fractured. It's broken. We need a new brand.
I agree with him that it was already fractured in 2016. And just for folks who don't remember how history played out, they went with Hillary ending too big to fail won't solve racism Clinton. And then Joe Biden admittedly won, but I would say he won on more populist grounds. And then Kamala Harris wanting these business, we're the party of business and aspiration. Well, how did that work out?
No, I mean, I just want to note here, Matt, and this is really, making me committed to the idea that we need to do a deep 2016 episode, right? But the fact of the matter is that, like, obviously everyone knows what this rhymes with, like we need a new brand. This is the new kind of Democrat soul searching that we're seeing in 2024, 2025, today, 26. But it's like the exact same pitch. And also, as you noted, Matt, it's Clinton, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris, right? Like this idea that like the party has been taken over by like the far left or anything like that is completely ludicrous. This is their party. They can own the successes, and they also have to own the failures here. Blaming it on Bernie Sanders is just ludicrous at this point. Y'all got what you wanted.
Yep.
And we're living through the hell of it right now.
And listen to the way he talks. I'll cut off the money. You're a timeshare mogul. What the fuck? Should anybody respect a Vegas timeshare mogul? Like, I don't want to cast aspersions on the industry widely. I haven't heard the greatest of things about the ethics in that. You sold a timeshare company to Hilton, and now your life is empty. I'm getting a little bit too far ahead of
please,
post-COVID. So let's just finish this out, because he does have some good abundancy style prescriptions here that no bumps in the road would have been a better name than abundance.
And I won't just say, because we are approaching almost a decade from it. For people who don't know, like this, we drank from this well on the Michael Brooks show.
Yes,
often. Like we played this clip probably almost every other episode. But anyways, go ahead.
And I forgot why, but it's so funny. He's so boisterous and like such a blowhard that it's.
Of Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, and then you're going to fracture the party even more.
It's fractured. It's broken. We need a new brand. It needs to be simple. Keep it simple. Tax reform. Keep it simple. Infrastructure. No bumps in the road. What more do we have to say? They need to have a new brand created.
Is the Democratic Party in worse shape than Republicans?
They're both insane.
But at the end of the day, like them or not, as I said earlier, there's a lot of people that don't like President Trump, but then they showed and voted Republican.
Okay, and that's it. So there's the sort of canonical Klubeck clip there. Now, Klubeck's in the news, David.
Yeah,
because you might not be aware. Yeah, you might not be aware that Gavin Newsom.
I'm not ready for what he looks like now, by the way. I'm looking forward to the face reveal.
There's a couple face reveals coming, actually. So Governor Gavin Newsom is term limited out in California. You know what that means. It's time
for a new brand.
Time for the state needs a new brand. And I will say,
no bumps in the road. What more is there to say?
You idiots.
All right. Thanks, man.
How hard could it be? And there's a little bit of this how hard could it be put me in there thing that we'll circle back to with the final clip I'm going to play here. But Klubeck was invited on to LA News to talk about this new governorship race. And let's see, after 8 years or however long it was, how our boy Klubeck is doing.
All right, Mark, thank you. In just over a year, California will see a new leader.
That's right. Governor Newsom will be termed out, and a long list of candidates are already lining up to take his spot in 2020.
And there's a little bit, unfortunately, mic interference here. You know, you can't get a good help these days.
26. Among those looking to win over Californians is businessman and first-time political candidate Stephen J. Klubeck. He is joining us this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I like the J, as you said, it's bougie.
It's bougie.
Yes, it is. It is bougie. Okay, so you're a long-time Democratic
Can we
donor,
get a sound
but
drop,
this is your
please?
First time running. Why run now?
What did she say there? I like the what? The J?
I like the J, and then he says, it's bougie.
Oh, his middle name, because he's not just Stephen Klubeck anymore. It's Stephen J. Klubeck.
He added the J.
I missed that. Sit up, Steve. But okay, go ahead.
Okay, so you're a long-time Democratic donor, but this is your first time running. Why run now?
Because I interviewed every candidate.
Yeah?
I've been around 40 years, politics and policy. I ran tourism in the United States. I worked for the White House.
Under the Obama administration.
Under President Obama, I created Brand USA. And beyond all odds, we were able to do that. Clinton tried it. Obama and myself were able to do it. And I ran Nevada, so I've actually changed laws in many states. I created and fixed the most broken hospitality company, Sunterra to Diamond Resorts.
Fix your
Against all
fucking
odds.
mic.
And as I sold that company to Hilton, I'm a self-made guy, grew up in Southern California, Valley boy.
Encino, yeah.
Right down the road from where we're sitting right now.
That's right, heavy-handed down the street. Best hamburger place in town.
Yeah.
You got to throw in the food Rex.
Come on. It occurred to me.
I love that he
California
never
changed
has a
a lot
train of
since I was
thought.
up here.
You know, he's constantly behind.
He thinks he's good at this, and he's not good at this. He's been doing cable hits for a long time.
Yeah, it's true.
And I don't think he gets up for it anymore. And he doesn't have the adrenaline. And this is buddy, you are in CBS News Los Angeles. You're thinking about running for governor. This is it. You need to make a fucking splash here, pal. Okay? Speaking of brands.
He's bougie and he's a Valley boy. No, I don't know. Maybe it plays well there. I couldn't tell you, but
Let's just do a little bit more of this, because he gets to some of his recommendations and some of his analysis. You know what? One thing you can say about Klubeck, stayed consistent.
Grew up here.
Yeah.
And I moved back home. I actually came back home where people are leaving. All my friends are leaving. But there's no better place to live in the world than California. So I interviewed every candidate, and not one was qualified for me to donate to. Not one even understood the solutions California needs to fix it.
So what were the issues that you were asking them about that you didn't feel they were qualified to fix?
I always do surveys with pollsters who I've worked with for decades, Frank Luntz, and public and private.
Heard of him?
And we went to the customer of California. California's not open for business. It's not affordable, livable, or workable. And not one candidate had solutions for any of those issues.
And that's things people care about. Yeah.
For folks just listening, he has the widest, his eyes are so wide, as if he is telling them that he's discovered like how to do time travel.
oh man, yeah.
This is how you know you've been rich for too long. Is like everyone's just like, "Wow, yes, sir,
Yeah, great job,
oh, amazing,
What?
yes." They were California's not open for business. Good point. Yeah.
And we went to the customer of California. California's not open for business. It's not affordable, livable, or workable. And not one candidate had solutions for any of those issues.
And that's things people care about. Yeah. What would be your solutions? Pick one of those and tell us the plan.
It's simple. No candidate's fixed broken. I have. I fixed the most destroyed hospitality company in the world.
Wait,
20 years
one second.
unfixable.
Wait, Matt, you're telling me that we have somebody running for public office who actually has business and private sector experience?
Isn't that a breath of fresh air?
In this country, I've never heard of that before.
And he's like, no one's actually fixed broken. Like, as far as I can gather, Klubeck was like some sort of like administrator for charities and stuff, and then basically took over a bunch of resort timeshare companies and sold it to Hilton.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, what lessons do you really have from that are going to apply to the rest of the country? I don't know.
Lay off a third of the housekeeping staff. As governor,
like, how about I get the Hilton CEO?
Yeah, the Hilton. We got to call. Yeah. California's not just open for business; it's for sale. You know.
Just a little bit more, and then I'm going to go back deep into Klubeck lore, which I was actually
this is such a treat. Thank you, Matt. I needed this.
And we not only fixed it, we made it survive and thrive. It was sold to Hilton. So we created value.
Oh, wow.
And we're all customers here in California. Not one politician sees us that way. We need equal or greater value. We have an insurance crisis in the state. It's fixable. I had to do that with my hospitality company worldwide.
Oh, shit.
And I did that solution on my website to fix our insurance problems. The affordability crisis. I used to build shopping centers here in the 80s. We need to go back to affordability.
Yeah.
And make sure that contract's fulfilled for all of us where we all can buy a home.
Okay, that's enough of that. I used to build shopping centers in the 80s.
Can't wait for you to be governor, my friend. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think we're the last generation that knows what the fuck he's talking about.
It's so true. I opened up a bunch of Tanger outlets.
Opened a bunch of Spencer's. We had the most efficient Spencer's gifts. Now, did you know that Klubeck is on TV more than just these cable hits?
Ooh.
In fact, a
man like that.
In the news stories about Klubeck running for governor, he's referred to as an undercover boss. And so when Klubeck talks about, I interviewed all these candidates and none of these candidates can do it, so I'm jumping in the ring, that's sort of a common move for him. And here is an episode of Undercover Boss, and we'll just watch a little bit of this. It is on Barry Weiss's or CBS, so hopefully they allow us to...
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they will.
So I don't know if you can see this, David.
Oh, who is that man?
That is our boy Stephen J. Klubeck in disguise. And we're going to see just a little bit of how this undercover boss stuff worked out for Steve.
Okay, so here from the desktop, this is where we work.
Does this system work good?
Yeah, sometimes it's a little bit slow, but Monarch Grand has a lot of different hotels, so we have to access the one from Kawasul. They're the owners of the timeshare.
I'm extremely...
Now, I like this clip for two reasons. One is because she says somebody else owns the company that he recently bought. And he gets really pissed about it. He gets so mad that his glasses start steaming.
Yeah, you're totally right.
The inside of his glasses.
I didn't even know your eyes could do that.
I've never seen this indoors. But there is steam in the glasses.
So right.
It's not able to escape because his glasses are too close to his face.
Oh my God. That's incredible.
And I mean, you'll get a little flavor for how Undercover Boss worked, at least when Klubeck was on, which is a situation arises like right before this. The receptionist is like, oh yeah, we put their credit cards, we write them right onto their paperwork. And he's like, that's actually legal to do. And he's like, you can't do that. So what this CEO is really interested in is compliance and also making sure everyone gets the right discount and they don't have to ask for it, which I'll just say stretches credulity a little bit. But let's see him react to the woman saying that she works for a different owner than him.
Yeah, sometimes it's a little bit slow, but Monarch Grand has a lot of different hotels, so we have to access the one from Kawasul. They're the owners of the timeshare.
I'm extremely livid right now. Diamond Resorts owns this property. I own this property. Doesn't make sense. The problem with that is I've got Diamond guests checking in. They expect to be coming to a Diamond Resort property. And if the front desk receptionist doesn't know she's representing Diamond Resorts, that's a problem for me.
was just about to go over my bill. I thought that you might be interested in some of the discrepancies we come across.
Yeah.
First of all, there's a car that gives you 10% off.
So we're going to skip a little bit ahead here because this lady basically says, like, I wasn't given discounts. And we'll see how he deals with this. And again, like, I just think, like, if CEOs are this generous with their money and offers to make things right, they should be on the floor every fucking shift, because people would not be having a problem with capitalism if this is how bosses acted about everything.
It's not their fault.
No, they were trained improperly.
And my son
I agree.
and his wife just got married here the other day.
Yep, good wedding.
Beautiful wedding.
Well, you know what? Wedding present, it's on me. How about that? I'm paying for his wedding.
Is this real?
Yes. I appreciate your business.
Thank you so much.
And that's American culture for you.
Thank you very much.
That's like, if you go back and watch the episode, the very first time he meets an employee, the employee, he's complaining about the state of the room. And he's like, the employee comes in and is like, you know what, I'll tell them, but they're not really that responsive in maintenance. We're just behind and everything. He's like, you know what? I like that you told me about how many problems you got here. Guess what? I'm going to pay for your college. And they just start crying. It's just a CEO realizing how alienated he is from the world, to the point where the company he owns doesn't even know he's the fucking boss. And not even, he doesn't even need the disguise, because they don't know who the fuck owns the company they're working for.
Who's this guy who's just breaking into tears constantly through the training video, following me around. Yeah, I mean, it's I'm looking forward to the Klubeck administration in California. Those roads are going to be smooth. Everybody is going to know who owns the state of California, because it won't be you. Pretty good. Man, yeah, dude, we got to do this. We got to do this rewind episode. I mean, hell, even just getting into do they still do that show? Is that show still on? The Undercover Boss? That was a real mindfuck of a show too.
You know, I never actually watched it when it was on.
You just watched it 6 years later on TikTok.
Yeah, like, and I'm trying to think. Like, I don't think it was a political. It did offend me in a way. Like, it annoyed me as somebody who, like, if I was working at Old Navy and the CEO was there.
Yeah.
Like, okay, maybe you offer to pay for my college. I'll be happy about it, but I wouldn't be like thrilled that you're doing. It seems a bit demeaning to the workers. I don't know.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's total propaganda. I mean, it's boss finds out that there's a problem in his company and does everything that he can to make sure that it gets right.
You're not getting the right discount? Oh,
which is why that's on television, because that never happens in real fucking life. You know what I mean?
Not only am I going to make sure you get the discount and all the future future customers get the discount, I'm going to pay for your wedding present and the wedding itself. Like, he just has to one up. He offered like the wedding present first, and he's like, that's not enough. I'm paying for the whole wedding. Screw it.
And I'm coming.
I mean, literally treating the business he works at like a strip club and just like splashing out cash on people.
It's totally true. Well, I'm glad he's still around. I'm glad that he's still on television, and I'm looking forward to. I'm looking. I mean, look, there's a lot of guys there's a book, Mr. Klubeck. There's a book that I think you might be very, very, very interested in. All right, friends. Well, it was so great having Alex and Judith on the program. Thank you all also for coming out and hanging out. I will just, remind everybody and announce that my book is out for pre-order now. The Myth of Red Texas. If I do say so myself, it is getting rave reviews. You can read some of them over on the OR Books website. We have the link below, and it's 15% off right now. I've been working on this for a while. People who've been listening to this program know, I've probably heard bits of it as I've talked about it. But I go deep into Texas history, and it's a lot richer and more radical than I think most folks understand. And I'm really looking forward to this being out in the world. So pick it up, get your copy now. Definitely get your tickets to the New York event if you haven't. I mean, I've heard like we are in single digits left there. So if you want to come, it's free, but you got to RSVP.
Yeah,
but anyways, folks,
we don't do a lot of the like, subscribe, share, write reviews stuff. Support our Patreon. But now is a good moment to pre-order this book. From what I hear, it's got a little bit of buzz, and you can really add to that by pre-ordering it right now.
Yes, please do. Well, folks, we will be back this Sunday with a patron-only bonus episode, patreon.com/leftreckoning. And as always, Matt and I appreciate all of y'all so much for supporting us and tuning into the program every week. And we will see you very, very soon, friends.